What is ecology? Ecology is the study of how plants and animals interact with one another and with their environment or surroundings. No plant or animal, not even man, can live alone. Living things influence one another and are also influenced by their surroundings. The environment includes everything that is to be found around us. There are two kinds of environment. The abiotic environment means the physical, non-living environment, which involves such factors as light, temperature, the amount of water available, and the oxygen supply. The biotic environment concerns other living things which an organism comes into contact with. Living things share the same home or habitat with other living things. A habitat is a place where an organism lives. It may be a river, pond, open ground, or a forest. In one habitat, we usually find more than one kind of organism. A group of individuals of the same kind living in a given area is known as a population. For example, in the jungle, you may have a population of bird's nest ferns. A population of snakes, a population of ants, the different populations of organisms living together make up a community. The different populations in a community interact with and influence one another. Let's take a look at a forest community. Green plants use light energy from the sun to manufacture food. Green plants are called producers, since only they can make food from raw materials by photosynthesis. These plants provide food for the animals that live there. Do the animals feed only on plants? Some of the animals feed only on plants, and these are called herbivores. Other animals prefer a meat diet. Animals that eat only other animals are known as carnivores. All these animals which feed on plants or on other animals are known as consumers. Let's take a look at some consumers. The grasshopper is a typical herbivore. It feeds on grass and young parts of plants. It is also known as a primary consumer. The grasshopper has a greenish body and is hard to see because its color blends so well with the surrounding vegetation. This is a good example of protective coloration. Why does the grasshopper need to protect itself? Does it have enemies? Yes. The grasshopper is a favorite food of the toad. We call animals like the toad carnivores or second-order consumers. The toad is in turn preyed upon by the snake, which is the third-order consumer. Birds of prey like the hawk feed on the snake. The hawk in this example is the fourth-order consumer. Now, let's ask ourselves this question. What happens when forest plants and animals die? When they die, organisms such as termites, bacteria, and fungi help to decompose their bodies. These organisms are called decomposers. The nutrients which are present in the dead bodies are returned to the habitat to be used by the green plants. Can you imagine what would happen if there were no decomposers? The earth would be piled high with dead bodies and we would have no place to live. So you see how important the decomposers are. You have just seen different organisms playing different roles in a community. Some serve as producers, others as consumers, and still others as decomposers. The role an organism plays in a community is known as its niche. Besides relating to one another and interacting with one another in many different ways, plants and animals of the jungle community also interact with the physical environment. The total interaction between the biotic community and the abiotic physical environment forms what is known as the forest ecosystem. We have seen that all animals obtain their food directly or indirectly from plants. For example, the grasshopper feeds on grass. The toad eats the grasshopper. The snake eats the toad. And the hawk eats the snake. This kind of relationship is called a food chain. Are all the food relationships this simple? No. In reality, a given species of animal may consume a variety of food, and it may in turn be a source of food for a number of different consumers. This far more complex relationship is called a food web. The toad in this food web may consume grasshoppers and cicadas. It may in turn be a source of food for the snake and the hawk. This figure shows another way in which food relationships may be represented. This is known as the pyramid of numbers. For a community to support a single hawk at the apex of the pyramid, some snakes are needed for the hawk to prey upon. These snakes need several toads for their food. The toads, in turn, require an even greater number of grasshoppers, which get their energy in the form of a tremendous amount of leaves. This means that a large number of plant tissues is required to support a small number of carnivores at the apex of the pyramid. There are many other interesting relationships among forest dwellers. One example is the predator-prey relationship. The praying mantis is a predator. Why is it called the praying mantis? It's so called because its forelegs are placed in such a position that it seems to be praying. These forelegs are modified to form a trap with folds like a pocket knife. The inner edges are armed with sharp spikes, which securely hold and kill its prey. The praying mantis eats grasshoppers and crickets. It is known as a predator, and its victim is termed as the prey. A predator is much like a robber. It destroys its prey all at once by superior size and strength. There is another type of organism that steals nourishment slowly from its host. It's rather like a blackmailer, harming its victim slowly but surely over a long period of time. Yes, we are referring to organisms called parasites. The strangling fig is an example of a plant parasite. It begins life as an epiphyte, that is, a plant perching on the high branches of forest trees. Later, it becomes a parasite, developing aerial roots which encircle the trunk of its host plant, slowly squeezing it to death. Whenever there's a shortage of materials in a community, there is competition among different individuals. In the forest, plants compete for light and nutrients. And animals compete for food and shelter. Do plants and animals in the jungle always compete with one another? Not always. There are organisms that work together and benefit each other. For example, these beautiful flowers that you find in the forest depend on insects to carry on the next generation. The insects visit the flowers to get food. The plants dust them with pollen, which they carry from flower to flower, bringing about pollination and fertilization. This relationship is known as mutualism. This is a colony of ants. They are called social insects. They form well-organized societies and work together to build their nests. Like the ant, man has learned to work together and is able to get much greater control over his environment. The early men were hunters. Later, man learned to domesticate animals and raise crops. He cut down trees to clear the forest and raise his crops. By doing so, he drastically changed his environment. Vast forest areas were destroyed without being replanted. This resulted in soil erosion and floods. The land became barren. Many people lost their lives and properties in the floods. This is one of the results man produces when he interferes with nature. Can we put a stop to this? Yes, you can. You must put into practice the knowledge you gain from the study of ecology. It's very important not to tamper with the ecology and upset the balance of nature.